Look, Andrew just said the Lancet report. How many of you here know about that or have heard of it? Quite a lot. I would expect this is you're a, in the best of senses, a very literate audience. If you haven't had a chance to look at it, do. You can look at it. It's E18 capitals. It's called the EAT Foundation, the Norwegian foundation that got funding from the Wellcome Trust, the very big, well, actually it's Europe's biggest medical charity, to fund a 3-year process, the commission, where basically sort of 19 people like me were thrown in a room for 3 years and said, what's a good diet, and can we have a good diet feeding 10 billion people by 2050? And I confess, when we started, my view was the answer would be probably no. Actually, our answer was yes. It can be done. And the proviso was, could we feed 10 billion people by 2050 without wrecking the planet and healthily? And that's where it gets very difficult. You could do it, but you tip the planet completely over. You destroy biodiversity. You would use all land resources. And so I've actually come out, I'm in my early 70s and I've worked on this for 45 years, what you're about. And I can just tell you the evidence gets stronger and heavier and broader by the day. It is just now unanswerable that food is the biggest driver of planetary overload. So you are in, and I'm being heavier than Andrew, you are in actually the key area of trying to make the world fit for our grandchildren to exist in. That's pretty heavy stuff, actually. I don't say that lightly. So how you, as restaurateurs, chefs, whatever, menu planners, or just business managers, how you address this issue of food and diet and the menu offer is in the center of one of the key features of what we need to do as a civilization. I cannot put it sounds pompous to use that sort of language, but that is actually what it is, how we live. Okay? So the stakes are very high, indeed. And go and have a look at the EAT. If you just put EAT-Lancet, Lancet is one of the oldest medical journals in the world. It's a 64-page, intensely small writing report, so it's heavy stuff. But EAT and Wellcome funded some translations. So the website is full of things that you can have a look at. If you want to actually know what the EAT-Lancet said, go and have a look at it. It's become the zeitgeist. Last week, this report came out, which I confess I was an advisor to the Food Farming and Countryside Commission report, just looking at Britain. Essentially the same message has come out. Whichever way we look at the data, basically the food system's got to change. And that's us. That's how we eat, what we eat, how much we eat, the shape, the pattern of the plate. Now, the problem is the data gets starker, and yet food culture is not responding fast enough. So in my world, we talk of the policy evidence gap. I have to do that. The evidence is piling up, but what we're actually doing isn't moving fast enough. And so you're not just in a hot spot, you're in a critical spot to try and accelerate that change. So the kind of shifts that Andrew was talking about, the 8% ZZ growth, the 60% this, that, and these are really important. But what we're not doing, I have to say, although your examples are good, Andrew, it's very easy to sort of say, okay, I'm doing it over here. I'm this outlier here. Your firm, whatever it is. You're out there, you're doing really great stuff and your business has grown. If these shares, these businesses are going in a different direction, the overall effect still remains not good, which is why I support SRA. And your 10th birthday next year, you should celebrate it. You've done great work. That's why I'm here. It's really good what you're doing. We've got to actually shift not just your business, but the whole population, if you like. You've got to see yourself as people who are not just ratcheting up your enterprise, doing whatever you can do, but trying to bring your colleagues with you. That's the tricky bit. And that's what the SRA is about. Basically, what we're doing, we've got some slides here. It's probably hard for you to see them, but they're available later, I'm sure. They're available, yeah, lots of notes. It's not just carbon, as we got here, CO2 equivalents, or water, or biodiversity. It's also about society and health. It's about population change, basically. That's what we've got to do. I've put in some of the studies. There are so many studies, it's unbelievable. This is a lovely one done by Pora Nemecek at Cambridge just last year. Essentially, a quarter of all the global greenhouse gas emissions are coming from food. Half of those come from animal products, and 50% of those come just from beef and lamb. Now, some people, I mean, I got hate mail when the Eat Lancet came out, literally. I mean, I'm a boring professor, you see. I've occasionally had hate mail, but it was mainly in the mad cow disease 30 years ago, and a few things around then. Don't get obsessed about beef and lamb, but they are the big hits. If that's your business, if you can reduce it, all the better. But the big picture is actually in this slide. If you can reduce animal products, doesn't mean say get rid of them. If your business is beef, stick to it, but maybe just reduce it a bit. Or make available more plant-based things alongside. So you're broadening the cultural shift. That's the message. This is from another study. Basically, whichever way we look at it, beef actually does come out the terrible thing. Now, I haven't confessed, but I freely confess, I probably look like a boring old fart. I am a boring old fart. But at one point, I was a farmer. And I bred pedigree Welsh black cattle. They are beautiful. I love them still. I don't eat them anymore. They emit huge amounts of greenhouse gases. There's a lot of work going on now. Some in the meat industry say it's all fine if you just stick to grass-fed, it's okay. It is better. If all beef was just grass-fed and not grain-fed, the emissions would go down, but actually they then go up because they live longer and they're not got out so fast. So it's more complicated. There is an argument from beef growers, breeders, that cattle are very good for sequestering carbon. They basically shit, as I'm sure you know, excuse my language, but you know what I mean. And it's very good for the soil. There's a cycle that goes on. None of us underestimate those sort of issues. The point is, they just emit a lot of greenhouse gas. And they use huge amounts of resources. Animals account for about 50% of all potable water use. The destruction of biodiversity is driven by trying to feed animals. We've actually made cattle into our competitors. It's bizarre, actually, if you think about it. My argument is a philosophical argument, not a science argument. My argument is, let's put animals back into their ecological niche. We've turned them and taken them out of their ecological niche. Let's put them back into their ecological niche. On biodiversity, this is a complicated one, but basically there's a lot of stuff. A huge amount of plants are available for us to eat. We actually eat very narrowly. The more you can be diverse in your cultural offer on the plate, the more that's sending signals back to protect the biodiversity. I'm always saying messages to farmers, get the biodiversity into the field, don't just say, isn't it wonderful, look at the biodiversity on the edge of my field. At the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization committee I was on, we argued, eat the biodiversity. Eat it, and that's the way to protect it. Well, actually here you can't see at the bottom, rice here. Anyone tell me how much embedded water is in a kilo of rice? It's about 3,500 litres before you cook it. Before you cook it. Before you cook it. I was a child in India when I had cancer and was very ill 15 years ago. All I wanted to eat was rice and dal. It was my baby food. Okay. So I actually happen to like rice and dal. You couldn't have more embedded water. Looking at climate change prognoses, as we did on the Lancet, the areas which are rice growing are the front line of climate change. They are going to be the most effective of all the plants. So big changes coming whether you like it or not, actually. This is a famous study. There's a huge database, if you want it, published by UNESCO now, but done by the team that did this. Hoekstra, a lovely guy at the Netherlands University of Twente. They've now measured the embedded water in 34,000 food items. We've got a pretty good picture. But, and there are differences. You know, water from a greenhouse-grown strawberry in midwinter is very high. Water embedded in a strawberry grown outdoors but eaten in summer is very low. So seasonality becomes a very important thing for you, actually. A whole different way of thinking is emerging from the science, is my message. So what we can do is really, I've said it, but this says it, eat differently, and that's part of your role. Change your food offer, and this is the complicated, boring, scientific, boring fart professor bit, what we call MultiCriteria Approach. What do I mean by that? Don't just think demonize meat. Don't just think it's all just about carbon. The thing about this terrible word that you've got, Andrew, in your title, Sustainable Restaurants, is it's not just about carbon. It's beyond carbon, actually. It's carbon, it's water, it's biodiversity, it's soil, it's culture, it's people's taste. It's these really tricky bits for chefs. Quality. We all aspire to quality. But what I think of quality and what you think of quality, that's what our mothers taught us. And we then learn in different ways. So you're actually in the zone where you're key culture change agents. And people like me bother to come and are very happy and in fact honoured to come and talk and listen to people like you. Because we want you to adopt multi-criteria approaches. Don't just think one thing matters. For the SRA, I wrote a piece when I shed a tear when I was made one of your food heroes. I did a piece I did a blog for you, giving what I would call 6 criteria. And for me, sustainability, and Daniel and I will broadly agree on these, and most of the science agrees on this. You've got to be thinking about food as an issue of quality. That's hard. There is some science around quality. You know, obviously safety and things like that matter, but it's mostly cultural. What is good quality to you or to me may differ according to where we've come from or how we learned from our grandmothers or whatever. Quality, health, environment, the economy of it, the affordability, the price of it, where are you positioning yourself, the governance of it. How have we made this decision? And I return back to my first point. That's why I'm so pleased to come and listen and talk with you people, because you're trying to put your heads together. And that's actually really important signal. It's a cultural signal for the restaurants industry, which has been known as very individualistic, big egos. It's actually changing and has changed, and also is often not like that as well. So I say all power to your elbow. Keep going on this, because I repeat, and WRI keeps on putting lovely reports out, really good stuff. Read the Lancet, read the WRI reports that Daniel will tell you about. read my book, Sustainable Diets, if you want a really boring book. It is deeply, deeply boring, but it was done in order to give you the boring evidence. You know, that's my job, is to try and overview what does the evidence say we need to do. And then when we look at what's going on, it's not what we're doing. So there's this gap. Our job is to narrow the gap between the evidence and what we normalise. And that's beginning, the optimistic thing, compared to 20, 30 years ago when I started doing serious work on this. Wow, are we moving fast? But that's because the evidence is so dire. So get on with it, basically.